starting point is not necessarily about the skills. It's about I hesitate to use the word, but mindset of the team members. If I'm working with a team, my ideal is people that are passionate about the problem that they're trying to solve. Skills I think people can learn, but I think that enthusiasm to work with others to achieve a goal is something that's kind of more innate, and can't really go on a course for that.
Welcome to the Product Agility Podcast, the missing link between Agile and product. The purpose of this podcast is to share practical tips, strategies, and stories from world-class thought leaders and practitioners. Why, I hear you ask? Well, I want to increase your knowledge and your motivation to experiment, so that together we can create ever more successful products. My name is Ben Maynard, and I'm your host. What has driven me for the last decade to bridge the gap between agility and product is a deep-rooted belief that people and products evolving together can achieve mutual excellence.
And we're back with David Spinks for episode 2 of 2. David is an author, scrum and product expert. And this time around, we're looking at one of the topics from one of his books, product teams, collaboration, purpose. It's a fantastic episode. You're going to love it. Do think of that one person, and maybe a new person who you haven't recommended this podcast to yet, because we want to grow our audience, and recommendations from great people like you make all the difference.
David, we spoke before about adopting Agile across borders, about cultural differences and what we can learn from that. And then towards the end, we deviated into things such as facilitation and teams and performance, the dirty word. Then I teed up saying, we're going to come back for another conversation where we're going to talk about product teams or product owner teams, something like that. So, David, let's not bother with introductions because everyone here has probably listened to the first episode, or they can read the show notes. Let's get stuck straight in. When we set this up, did we say product owner teams or product teams?
What about product teams? Yeah, we didn't really want to get too stuck on any language that might infer any assumptions.
Yeah, any assumptions of Scrum. You mentioned safe. Yeah. I don't know how popular that is. Let's not talk about that, shall we?
Yeah, we just don't have time.
There's not enough hours in the day. So in your mind, David, what makes a skills composition perspective, let's take this angle to begin with, what makes a good product team?
Good question. So I think a starting point is not necessarily about the skills, it's about I hesitate to use the word, but mindset of the team members. If I'm working with a team, my ideal is people that are passionate about the problem that they're trying to solve. Skills I think people can learn, but I think that enthusiasm to work with others to achieve a goal is something that's more innate, and can't really go on a course for that. So yeah, I think my most important characteristic for a product team would be a group of people willing to collaborate to solve.
And this from your perspective as a coach?
Yeah, I don't know what you'd call me nowadays. Coach, trainer, mentor, teacher, team member, maybe. I still work in teams as well. I just joined a team in the last couple of weeks, actually, as a team member. It's working with... So I work in the training space, and I'm working with others to provide services to help train trainers, essentially. So supporting and enabling.
But I want to get a bit specific, right? I liked your answer as to what is a product team, but I thought it was a little bit motherhood and apple pie. Don't you think? Who couldn't disagree with that, David?
I don't know, and yet we're not really seeing it. I'm still seeing organizations that will have some sort of skill matrix, and they feel like they've got to tick every box. I know an organization that thinks, okay, we're going to use something like Scrum. Every team must have a product owner, a Scrum master. In their circumstance, they've got a project manager as well. Whatever the size of the project or the product that's being worked on, there's almost this tick box exercise of these are the things that need to be put on the team, regardless of thoughts around how they fit together, what the people like, etc.
You hope people learn, right, and know that things need to be different. There are certain patterns, right, that organizations find work for them some of the time. And when I think of like product team, I suppose let's kind of unpick this a little bit, because you got Mr. Kagan's view of a product team, which is very similar to Boz and Craig's description of a feature team. Not their description maybe, but at least their description plus what they really meant. That doesn't really help much, does it? But you get what I mean. And then you've got Scrum, which has had the Scrum team for a long time, which was developers, Scrum Master, Product Owner, more or less. And then you've got Safe, which is Product Owner at a team level, and you've got all these different kind of patterns. I say it gets confusing. And when we say product team, I've got a rough idea in my head of what I mean when I say product team. But when we say product team, David, what are you conjuring up in your mind?
It's interesting because you mentioned a few things there, and we could throw in DevOps as well. DevOps came along, had another definition, and you look at the definition, and when you unpick it, it's like the words are different, but it almost means the same thing as the Scrum people were talking about, the cross-functional team. So for me, it is one of the, and I think this is talked about in less as well. Like one of the problems that we've got with organizations is things are slowed down. We've got delays, and we are inherently unable to be agile because of handoffs between departments, between functions, between teams. So for me, a product team is we've got a group of people that can take a concept, an idea, and see it all the way through to delivering some value and validating. Mm-hmm. So we want to eliminate dependencies as much as possible. Not managing them, eliminating them. So all the skills on the team, of course, Scrum talked about this with its cross-functional team. Unfortunately, what we see in the organizations is the people that build things, that's going to be the Scrum team. Maybe the people that test things as well. If you're lucky, they're part of that team as well. But there's still separate things that happen by different groups of people, and there's still this baton being handed to a group of people that build stuff that then hand it over to a group of people that support stuff. So for me, as a product team, is that group of individuals that go from concept to done to validated to supporting a product throughout its lifetime. I think that's the thing, is that understanding that products have lifetimes, and how the product is going to be managed is going to be different at different parts of its lifetime.
So are you advocating that a team, which was a development team or maybe like a feature team, as some people would call it, should have the requisite product enthusiasm and skills on a full-time basis to be able to take new ideas from beginning to end? Or are you more on the camp of a single product person serving, like helping multiple teams and their skills are shared between them? Where's your head at?
I think the latter is challenging. I think I'm probably more in the camp of having some group of people with maybe a final decision maker who is focused on what can I do to maximize the value of this product. It might change, like mentioned, as the product goes through its life cycle. Maybe we're getting products that are getting more towards maturity and end of life. Perhaps those product people could actually be thinking about new products as the old one is coming to end of life. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not giving you a black and white answer here, is it? I was like, we've been speaking. This is our second episode, and I think this is going to be the first time I say it depends.
That's not bad going. That's almost pretty much an hour. It really does depend, and I don't think there is a cookie cutter approach to it. And I know of organisations that have done extraordinarily well with having like team level like product ownership, and I use a little like bunny ears for this to say that they call it product ownership. It's not what I would call product ownership. Generally speaking, these are just really skilled, experienced humans with solid analysis skills who are doing a fantastic job helping the team own and refine the parts of the backlog that are relevant to them and the teams they work closely with. And I think that works. And yeah, I wouldn't call them a product owner, but I don't care. If they want to call them that, fill your boots, right? That's fine. There are some things you maybe want to see in place, like having somebody who is able to say, and this is where we're going, and this is our vision. But I think that one thing where the Agile world, for me, tends to fall down is that, it's speaking from someone that is, one, supports product people, product organizations, but also kind of developing my own products, software products, is that there's a whole heap of skills I haven't got. I just haven't. There's some things which I love learning. I love taking the data and doing like financial projections and looking at kind of market capacity and trying to understand all various types of things. I love all of that. But when it comes to, say, executing some solid user research, I'm either going to a book or I'm contacting someone that can help me out. So I think that there is an element of naivety historically with people who have embraced Scrum, believing that you've got a single product owner that owns a product and then the teams underneath that or with that product owner can do all of the work, because there just isn't enough hours in the day, there isn't enough goodwill in the world which will enable those teams to learn the skills necessary to actually deliver a world-class product and keep it relevant and keep it real, nor is there the time to augment the team with the skills and have them on their full time to do that kind of work. Does that make sense?
And you could talk about any sort of skill. You mentioned UX there. You could talk about other specialists, database administrators, test specialists, designers, architects. So it's the same problem with all of the skills. But I think it's a misunderstanding to think we need to make everybody skilled at everything because, like you say, it's unrealistic. It ain't going to happen. I think there's probably very few teams in the world that even get anywhere close to that. But where I'm coming from is trying to bridge that gap, and it comes into a little bit of what we were talking about yesterday, is as a product team, can we have empathy for each other on what we're actually trying to do? So my background is in programming, the coder. If I come in, I just care about coding, right? Just tell me what to code and I'm going to do it, right? And if everybody has that attitude, then there's an even stronger alliance on that. Where are we going to call them, that product person, to have that vision to make sure that we're going in the right direction? And that's a risk, right? So what we're saying, and this is what the purpose of the book was, how can we be more collaborative? It's called Mastering Collaboration in the book team. How can we involve people more so we can empathize with each other in terms of this is what we're trying to achieve? You mentioned Scrum, and Scrum talks about the product goal, making that transparent to the whole Scrum team. Fine. Is that really going to change me coming in and still change my attitude of thinking I'm going to come in and do my coding from 9 to 5? I don't really get involved in anything else.
We'll talk about what we're going to say, but I found that pretty weak. Like putting a product goal in.
I understand why it's there. There was definitely
there is a gap that the companies wouldn't survive probably if they didn't have a decent one. It's like saying turn up to work with your clothes on.
I don't know, but then again, is this one of the things that we take for granted? And again, I see it. You go into an organization and you ask, what is your vision? What's your strategy? And it's scary. Tell you a true story. I asked one CEO, what is your organizational vision? And with a straight face, his answer was to grow revenue by 11% next year.
That's it.
That's not a product goal. That's not a vision. But yeah, bringing it back to Scrum, we can talk about sprint goals, but where is it taking us? So yeah, I do, and I'm a Scrum.org trainer, so maybe I would say this, but having that product goal gives us at least that sort of understanding of what we're stepping towards.
It does, and it's useful, don't get me wrong. But as I said to a mutual acquaintance, I believe, John Coleman, like product goals, product visions are fantastic, right? They can really make a difference if the person creating it is a visionary. If it isn't, it's increased revenue by 11%. And visions are for visionaries. Yeah. I think one of the problems is that in tech organizations, the ones who haven't historically had a strong product focus will understand what it is to be product-led, or have got strong user research arms and user experience, or understand the broader market, or in a really competitive landscape. When you have a traditional tech organization where it's all about supply and demand, tech in the business, where it's about document handover and contracts, none of the trusts that we're talking about in the previous episode either. But in those firms, insert something like Scrum, a product goals, product owner, it never really lives up to the dream because the system isn't there to support it. True product organizations are probably doing most of that anyway. So I think this is the gap almost is I think great product orgs are just doing a good job at a lot of this probably anyway, and if they're not, then they don't survive. And it's the tech firms who want to be more product-like in that transition, or maybe young product firms that are starting up that need a bit of guidance where some of this can be really useful. But there is a stark difference between, let's say, like the product organizations and the product teams you see there, and tech firms who are trying to do it but aren't really hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And again, we could take lots of different elements from Scrum and say there's lots of industries, lots of organizations that are already good at this stuff. Hey, come together and have an alignment meeting once a day. We've been doing that for years.
But to pick up on your point then, and the one thing I would agree with, I'm going to talk about an old episode a little bit It's actually caused the first time in the history of the podcast there was some challenge put out over LinkedIn, actually, because one gentleman, Fred Fowler, in his episodes said that, and I don't think he used the word hypothetically, but hypothetically speaking, one team could deliver anything because they can learn and they are cross-functional. And that was the idea, early ideas of Scrum, was that one team could deliver anything. And it was the first time I'd seen some pushback from certain people on that, saying, no, hold on, are you being serious about that? And it was an interesting debate, because I think whilst teams can learn and they can grow, given infinite time and infinite budget, we would do that. We never have either. So to pick up on your point and around your book, around the collaboration that you can get, when we're talking about a product team, then I don't think it can be about having all the time in the world to develop all the skills that you need, nor do you have time to go and hire people and then inject the context and the culture in their minds so they get it all, they're instantly effective. So it does come down to people collaborating and working together and making use of the skills, I suppose, between teams, or having someone help multiple teams along those lines. In your book, what did you offer up to help with some of this collaboration conundrum?
So part of it is, a big part of the book, our subheading is we've got 70 techniques on how teams can be collaborative. And a big part of it is, like I say, how as a product team can we solve particular problems? And we can talk about the different skills, but fundamentally, the danger of the type of work that we do is we start to assume that there's a problem that may or may not exist. We might build something to try to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
What if we're wrong? There's certain UX techniques in here. There's things about keeping stakeholders engaged, because again, a really important point as well. So a big part of it is around communication, learning, and making sure that we're building up evidence that we're going in the right direction with our product. So again, if I bring us back to that example that I gave of me being a coder coming in doing 9 to 5, I could be the best coder in the world, but if I'm coding the wrong thing, or if I'm solving the wrong problem, then that's just waste. So even if I'm not going out and doing the user research, can I at least look at the results of the user research to help inform me of the problem to be solved? So I'm not saying I should go out and be interviewing people and doing all the UX work, but to be a professional, I should have more skin in the game in terms of asking the right questions and informing me. If it's my job to actually do the building part, I need to understand the problem. If I'm going to understand the problem, then I need to get involved in some of that stuff somehow. And maybe it's just observing a UX professional carrying out some interviews so that I can start to have some empathy with those potential users. So again, I'm not saying it's all about asking everybody to go and do every skill. It's about just giving some exposure, and that's what we talk about mainly in the book, is around techniques, so that we can involve the whole team a little bit more, and it's just not on one person to do particular specialisms and then handing the results over.
Sensible. But you mentioned the E word there, empathy, and I think that for teams to be able to increasingly develop an increasingly accurate empathetic understanding for those that are going to be receiving the thing they are creating helps them to make better micro decisions about what they're doing along the way, and also know what better questions to ask. I take no credit, by the way, for that statement. That is direct from Craig Larman. So don't anyone think I'm clever, trying to disprove this idea that I'm clever. I stole that one from Craig. Thank you, Craig. I know Craig's an avid listener to the podcast.
I'm sure he is. Just like Mallory from earlier as well. I'm sure.
Guy with Mallard, yeah, he listens to. Like I did ask Craig to record an introduction to the podcast actually last time I saw him, but I never got around to it. Next September when I see him at the LS conference, I will ask him to record a little introduction. Chits and giggles. But is there then a tip that you can recall from your book that you could share with us? Because I liked what you were saying around getting people to collaborate, making use of those skills. It's about kind of helping people build that understanding of maybe skills that they haven't got so they're more capable of doing things and covering the end-to-end. Are there any tips you can share with us now about people having to purchase a book? Maybe as a little teaser for them.
Or, okay, let me try to bring it back to what you were saying. So you've got concerns around the time it will take to get people involved. And some of these techniques, they're designed and they're things that are used in the field. We haven't invented all of them. Some of them are, so again, I've co-written this with partner Gladia, who we spoke about. We also partnered with a lady called Natasha Hampshire, who's a UX expert. So yeah, these are techniques. Some of them we've created, some of them are used in the field. But yeah, the whole point is that they are designed so that they can be done quickly and you can learn quickly. Because again, the concerns you raised are very real. A very popular one that we use quite a lot is Crazy Eights, for example. Here's a particular problem to solve. Rather than just a designer sitting in isolation, bring everybody together. And again, we would thread these techniques together to understand the user, their problem, what is their need. And threading up to that, we might go into an ideation stage. So this is kind of stuff from design thinking. The Crazy Eights is a technique, bring everybody together, present the problem, 8 minutes, 8 ideas, everybody involved. So maybe you've got 10 people in your product team. Everybody's going to come up with one solution per minute. And at the end of that, you're going to have 80 ideas, 80 solutions. Okay. And that's the starting point to then take the next stage. You could talk about divergence. So a divergence conversion technique. How do I then go from Crazy Eights, the output of that? I might use a tool like an affinity map to organize that data. And then some other techniques to converge on what do we think the best solution is. So again, rather than having one person coming up with ideas and designs in isolation, triangulating together as a product team. So it's
solid
things
advice.
like that.
So even say drawing in then from that strong kind of UXy product other world. Well, I suppose for a long time people have always said, can it work with Scrum? You're pulling in some of these little threads and you have an extra contributor who has experience specifically in the UX world to help build out some of those ideas. Very good.
Yeah, like I say, the book is co-authored between the three of us. I think part of the strength is that we've all come from different backgrounds. So my background is on the development side, the building stuff. Claudia she's come from a background of analysis and product ownership and testing. And Natasha, like I say, from the UX space as well, bringing all of our different perspectives together, made it the book that it is.
What would you say is the biggest anti-pattern in this kind of product agile, product agility world, where you've got these different skill sets coming together and you've got people trying agile on one side historically and people trying to be productive on the other side and bring it together? It's based upon your books full of things that people could try and should attempt if they're facing some kind of problems. But what would you say are some of the biggest anti-patterns, the most kind of common things that people are doing which are actually counterproductive?
I think empowerment is probably one of the big ones. Hey, you're a product team, but you've still got people that identify or have been identified as you're the coder, you're the analyst, you're the tester. And I'm still seeing in organizations, developers, you're not allowed to test. Or testers, you're not allowed to go and interview someone. Okay? So it is still this departmentalization, these functional silos, even when we've got supposedly teams working together. It's almost like we're creating this umbrella term team, but within that we've still got sub-teams. So I think that's one of the big ones.
So it's hard for people if they're being assigned a specific role, but there's an obligation for those people to work together as a team because it's very individualistic. Right? So it's more like a working group than it is a team. Right? People having a team being I hate the word cross-functional, but a team with a shared objective, a shared goal that they're willing to put aside some of their own desires and wishes to try and achieve, that they have complementary skill sets and they're willing to learn and transform and they're all headed in the same direction. Yeah. And as a consequence of that, compared to a group, there's a performance increase from them doing that. But when people are then saying, I'm a developer, I'm not allowed to test, and I'm a tester, I'm not allowed to talk to users, then how can you may have complementary skills, but the system isn't allowing them to complement each other, are they? They're just having to work as individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, team structures and how people are awarded and the annual appraisal, assessing you as an individual, how well have you done your task this year, that's all contributing to it. So yeah, I think you're right. One of the organizational structure thing and the way that we look at individuals rather than what teams are achieving together, I think is definitely one of the other barriers, I would say.
In your opinion, why would this is a trick question, by the way, not a trick question. I would like to hear your opinion on it. Why would testers want to talk to their users rather than, say, use a research professional? Where do you see the benefit in that?
I've seen people take both stances. Some people that are very much, I just want to do my job, I just want to stay in my specialism, and other people that are, it'd be great to talk to the users because I can understand where they're coming from, how they think. What if I'm going to be testing this thing? I need to think about how they might be using the product. What are they trying to achieve? What's the task they're trying to complete with this product? So I think hopefully those people would see the benefit of, or are seeing the benefit of, if I understand the user, if I understand what they're trying to achieve, the only way to do that is to observe them, talk to them, and it will help me to ultimately provide a better product. So I do think, again, there's these two mentalities, and we're talking about the product team versus maybe people that are maybe not suitable for the type of work that we're talking about quite as much. I think I talk about this in some of the coaching and training that I do. Is we're not hobbyists. We're not there to dabble in code. We're there to actually solve a problem. There needs to be a purpose for what we're doing. And in that example, we can only understand the purpose if we understand the people whose needs we're trying to fulfill. I think so. If you don't care about that, I might turn the question around. Why wouldn't you want to understand your users more? Why wouldn't you want to go talk to your stakeholders?
It's that classic, isn't it, around the tester being objective? And I've heard it parried around far too many times over the years, which is, testers shouldn't be connected to the rest of the world effectively because they're supposed to test things totally objectively, which is just utter nonsense. I see very little value in keeping anyone at a distance from the customers. There's research by Price and Toy. Maybe one of the largest pieces of research done into team performance. It said that teams that have a closer proximity to their customers are more likely to be reaching higher levels of performance than their peers, because it's something about connecting to the customer. Or one, it gives you purpose, which is motivating. It means you put a face to it, and it probably means you're going to make less spurious mistakes because you understand what you're trying to achieve and for whom. And if you can go and talk to them, you can test it out verbally before you have to implement it in any way.
Absolutely, yeah. Comes back to, we could talk about some of the Dan Pink stuff, right, around mastery, autonomy, and purpose, right? If I don't understand what impact my work has, am I really going to be that motivated? Again, I'm just going to come back and do my 9-to-5 coding job. I'm not really going to have the passion. I'm not really, and if I don't have that passion, am I really building the best product that I could?
And when I said not discounting that people develop good products all the same, but I think there is a huge amount to be said for getting teams close to the users. And I like personally, I understand why there's roles in between the users and the teams sometimes, but I don't think that should be a reason to not have that person as a relationship builder and someone bringing the teams and the users closer together, as long as they are not threatened by the prospect of their world changing and having other people influence their output for the better, but still influence the output. I think that's that. I think there's a big personal journey for some, which is saying, how can I continue to do the stuff I'm excellent at without having to be seen as the one person that's excellent at it? How does my role become more of a relationship builder and user and applier of skills?
Yeah.
Rather than just being, I'm here to do my job.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, there still needs to be control, and because if it's just a group of people trying to do everything, That's just a road to chaos. We still need accountability, and we need the skill of facilitation as well. I mean, we mentioned UX people, they're the expert at that, but how can they become an enabler? How can they facilitate some of the stuff that they do with our stakeholders, with our users, and the rest of the team? All sorts of UX techniques we could talk about. I've mentioned Crazy Eights, right? That just won't happen by itself. Someone needs to facilitate that. All the steps leading up to that. Tools like empathy mapping, understanding our users, looking at the results of research and data, collating that. So there's facilitation skills needed, there's guidance that's needed. But what we're saying is it's no longer just one person in isolation doing it. They're facilitating the process and hopefully making things transparent for everybody and involving people and bringing their opinions. Like we talked about in the last episode, the strength of the team is the diversity of perspectives and knowledge and skills that everybody brings to the team. So why not try to leverage it rather than just saying, this is all you do?
What are some of the characteristics that people should be looking for in a facilitator for a product team?
I think there are certain facilitation skills which will help. First of all, they need to demonstrate some of these skills, such as active listening, which sounds like a simple thing, but actually, when human beings are not great listeners, are we? But active listening isn't just sitting here and listening. It's actually suspending judgments. It's actually being open and not jumping to thinking about what I'm going to say next or giving you feedback. It's actually, I'm just going to listen and try to understand what's being said and suspending that judgment. So demonstrating that, encouraging that in others. In the last episode, we mentioned conflicts. So understanding the different types of conflicts, healthy conflict, which is where people are challenging each other's ideas, critiquing, versus resorting to personal attacks and wanting my idea to win over yours because
it's probably better. It is probably better.
Oh, yes. I think one of the most important facilitation skills is being able to be neutral, allow the process to go through. So a lot of facilitators might focus on, we need to keep things to an agenda. We need to make sure that we stick to the time box. I need to cut this conversation off and a decision needs to be made. Okay, but that's not great facilitation, because facilitation is allowing the group of participants to explore the ideas, each other's ideas, come to that shared understanding so that we can converge on the best one. So how can a facilitator create that space, being neutral and allowing all those sort of ideas to come out? So I mentioned active listening as one example. And again, having a toolbox of facilitation techniques that allow that to happen. And again, just throwing people into a room, let's discuss as a group. Again, a little bit like we were talking about last week, you've got to cater for the different characteristics of the team. How can you bring facilitation techniques that are going to allow the different personality types to come to the fore? You might have people that are louder, other ones that are more reserved. How can you, again, harness and leverage those diverse perspectives in the team, as well as a good facilitator can make a difference?
Basically, what about that hosting a podcast, having these conversations, particularly around the agenda thing, is that, and it's something I kind of mentor people on and say, you may have an agenda, which is your proposed agenda, but actually what you'll find in the room is that there'll be an emergent agenda. And part of your role as a facilitator is to help the group understand, is that emergent agenda a higher priority than what was previously agreed? And if it is, then do they want you to help make the space to explore that emergent agenda? And I think that's a really powerful skill to have, to be able to deal with that in a calm way, because when things go off piste, you can get carried away with it and not bring that up and not raise awareness and zoom out about the emergent agenda, which is what happens on some of these episodes. We go down a rabbit hole somewhere, and then before you know it, wow, okay, that wasn't what we agreed to talk about. I think in a podcast you can get away with it, but sometimes when you're dealing with people's emotions and people's careers and how they're trying to work together, actually there's a certain, having consideration for that is incredibly important, and knowing how to deal with it when it arises is a invaluable facilitator skill, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, without strong facilitation, we're not dealing with robots, we're dealing with people. If people are feeling like they're not listened to, like their contributions don't matter, because there's someone more, someone louder in the team, someone that is more outgoing, then that person's just going to feel shut down, and it's just going to become a spiral where they do become the person that says, I'm just going to turn up, do my thing, do enough not to get fired, do enough so that I can get paid. But what a waste of that person's perspective, their skills, their opinions. That I mentioned Crazy Eights, and it's not just a nice technique to generate lots of ideas, but it's giving a way for everybody to surface their thoughts and create an equal platform. And that's just one technique. That's just one facilitation technique to try to create that platform to allow the best ideas to come out rather than it be dependent on also who it came from.
And I think there we shall end this, David.
Thank you very much. On that bombshell. Was this a bombshell this time?
Yeah. David, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better. It's been very nice. Yeah. And
thank you, Ben. I've enjoyed it.
What can we ask for? Hopefully everyone else is enjoying it too. They were going to say marvellous things about us on the internet. David, thank you so much for coming on. I will put information about your books and courses and whatever else we feel is valuable, you feel is valuable, there will all be in the show notes. Is there anything that you would like to share with the listeners before we wrap up?
Oh, yes. Put me on the spot there. Anything that I want to share. Again, I'm always happy to chat about this stuff. I could talk about products. I can talk about culture for hours. It just feels like we scratched the surface on some of these subjects. I'm always open to a conversation. So I'm on LinkedIn. If you want to reach out, connect with me, feel free to have a chat. If you want to talk about any of those things or any of the training that I offer or facilitations. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity, Ben.
The pleasure was all mine. So thank you very much, David. And thank you everybody for listening. You will hear from us again very soon. Thank you.
And so ends our time with David Spinks. David was a fantastic guest. He is a fantastic author, and I really recommend that you check out his books. Now, next time around, we're going to go deep on product. We're going to hear some amazing stories about how product was used in a children's hospital, about how product is being used to help the opioid crisis in the United States of America. And who is giving us these fantastic bits of information? A gentleman named Amir Kaplan. Now, I had an amazing time talking to Amir, and I'm excited that these episodes are coming out. It took us a long time to get things scheduled, but when we did, it was glorious. So make sure that you subscribe because we're back again next week. Thanks once again for listening. I'm Ben Maynard and this is the Product Agility Podcast.